Greetings, fam. Greetings once again. This is the Reverend Dr. Claude A. Sinclair at your service. We're going to talk about spiritual and economic prosperity today. Spiritual and economic prosperity. How do we get there? And then, how do we balance the two together? Your spiritual side and your materialistic economic side. How do we balance the two together, or can they be balanced? The answer is Boardwalk School of Economics. Boot camp. You'll understand after you listen. What is your number one why? When it comes to making and having more money, this question will be addressed and answered in this message. What is your number one reason why when it comes to you making money, and having more money? What is your why? Why would you be interested in such a thing? What is your why? What motivates you to get up so you can make money? Is it just to pay your rent, to keep a roof over your head, so you can have nice things, so you can look good on the outside? What is your why? Let's first address the elephant in the room. The average African elephant will grow to be between 8.2 to 13 feet from shoulder to toe and weigh between 5,000 pounds, which is 2.5 tons, to 14,000 pounds, which is 7 tons, or 2,268 to 6,350 kilograms, according to National Geographic. You can see this in the ginormous problem. You can see that this is a ginormous problem. The elephant in the room. The African elephant, just like our industrial and intellectual capacity, is an endangered species in the hood. Was there anything left that we can call the hood? Is there anything left that we call the hood? Do we have our neighborhoods intact? Are our communities intact? Or are they just a thing of the past because of all this gentrification taking place? Where are we going? I know in LA they moved them all the way up to Lancaster and out of the LA area in the basin, and in the towards the San Bernardino area. They move them out of the city and they relocate them away from the industrial center of the city. Metaphorically speaking, how do you eat an elephant? Not that we would want to eat an elephant, but metaphorically speaking, how do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time. One bite at a time. The same thing here. How do we address the issue of money in our communities? One bite at a time. Money is the root of all evil. That's the elephant in the room. Money is the root of all evil. A popular current text, the King James Version, tells us in 1 Timothy 6 chapter verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Okay, let's touch on that a little further. You see, we have been taught this as children growing up in our churches and homes, while every other culture has come into our land and now communities and takes everything precious that we have, which is our money and our best minds. First of all, the person who coined this phrase, Bible or not, probably didn't have any money. Money is just a tool and is not to be worshiped. Ask your pastor why the bucket is passed so often during the service. They want that money. Bills got to be paid. Salaries have to be paid, and the preacher has to be paid. They tell you one thing and practice another thing. I addressed this issue during this presentation and in my initial orientation class. in order to immediately address your thinking process when it comes to money so it can be in alignment with your overriding spiritual purpose. You see, when you do not understand the purpose of money, besides from a purely materialistic and gluttonous point of view, which you see plastered all over the telly, designed to enslave your primal nature if you fail to evolve and see the big picture. What is the big picture? This is how you can lock up and enslave over 2.5 million people and trap even more in the criminal just us system of oppression, providing extravagant living for some and misery for a lot more, destroying their entire future. You see, this is the problem, and everything else is a symptom. Falling in love with money without fully understanding the purpose of money in a modern, constantly evolving society. You see, if you do not worship money, you will attract even more money without the risk of turning evil in your hands. For example, I've heard people say, I take my money seriously. Don't mess with my money. And I got my mind on my money and my money on my mind. Not to mention the type of activity and conduct that leads for you to become incarcerated in the first place. How can you lock up 2.5 million people unless they got their mind on their money and their money on their mind? I hope you are motivated to stick around and spend some time with me. I guarantee it will change your outlook on how you live your life. If you are still among the living and can listen carefully in order to process what I'm saying about life and money. Talking about your spiritual life. I am Dr. Claude A. Sinclair, Esquire, pastor of the Temple of Inner Peace and Prosperity. You should all know by now that the kingdom of heaven resides in you. Then came these striking words, neither shall they say, lo here or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17, verse 21. With these words, Jesus gave voice to a teaching that is universal and timeless. Let me tell you a little about myself before we get started in my authority for this message. Fair warning, if you get unnerved and your brain starts hurting, it is just the Spirit of God chasing the poverty demons away. And they are trying not to leave, convincing you to turn off and turn away from this message. That's okay too, because the technology is such that you can meditate and talk to your inner God, who, believe me, is trying to come out, and you can both talk and work it out. And then you can come back a little later. When I left home to join the Air Force at the age of 18, although I was raised in the church, this caused me to have my first spiritual encounter with the power and glory of God, which not only changed my life, but whose guiding force prepared me for this moment. Just look at my biography, a story for another time though. You see, everything God has directed in my life was to free the people from mental slavery. Let me ask you, how can a few hundred people own all the world's resources, while 99.9% are left to struggle for survival? Think about that. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Let's meditate on this for a moment. What is the definition of wrestle? What is the definition of wrestle? Wrestle is a verb, which means it's an action word. It is to take part in a fight, either as sport or in earnest, that involves grappling with one's opponent and trying to throw or force them to the ground. He wrestled with the intruder before being knocked unconscious. To struggle with a difficulty or problem. To struggle with a difficulty or problem. Wrestling. To struggle with a difficulty or problem. And I just noticed that in the first part of the definition of wrestle, it does say to take part in a fight. I don't think that is really fighting. I'll talk about that in a second. Wrestling is when you wrestle, I guess you can consider it a fight, but wrestling is not the intent to draw blood or destroy the other person. Let me go further. In military lingo, there is a strategy called shock and awe, overcoming an opponent with sudden and overwhelming force. Yet we have the numbers in the situation and refuse to wrestle with wickedness in high places. What is the definition of wrestle? Grappling with one opponent. We've seen wrestlers that grapple with each other and try to throw or force the other opponent to the ground. He wrestled with the intruder before being knocked unconscious. And now some of you will think wrestling and fighting are the same thing. They are not. Because as you can see, fighting in this context is also a verb. It means to take part in a violent struggle or confrontation involving the exchange of physical blows or the use of weapons. The men were fighting. So in this context of wrestling, we're not dealing with a violent struggle involving the exchange of physical blows or the use of weapons. Excuse me. In this context of nonviolent struggle, as our renowned civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King espoused, nonviolent. And our esteemed and renowned leader, Malcolm X, Brother Malcolm, told us that the revolution would not be televised because it will take place in the mind. Unfortunately, they both did not possess the ability to formulate a nonviolent strategy for the people other than marching and sit-ins. I'm not saying that this strategy did not have its benefits. I'm just saying that this strategy without more leads us into a dead-end alley, bumping our bloody heads against the ceiling of stagnation and oppression that we continue to find ourselves in decades later, right? So we're not asking, the reason I'm trying to draw a distinction between wrestling and fighting is that we don't have to fight if we can just get control of ourselves. We're wrestling with ourselves now. We're wrestling with ourselves, fighting with the inner God. A lot of people say they got that two demons on it. One's telling you one thing and another is telling you the other. So we're wrestling with ourselves, our inner God, trying to get us to stand up and do the right thing. So let's step back. So in order to wrestle or fight, you have to be prepared in any situation, which means you have to have been in training, which means getting in shape for the task ahead. A wrestler would train during the week. He would condition himself as any athlete would before he entered into the competition that he was training for. When I joined the military, in order for them to put me into shape, into the man they needed me to be, and most importantly, the man that I became, even though I did not understand it at the time, I had to go through boot camp, which involved physical and mental training. So consider this boot camp this program boot camp because I know the training works.